David Hume might be the representative of what happens when we go way too far down this path of empiricism. Now, when we had our discussion of John Locke, it all felt pretty comfortable. Yeah, I can understand that. That makes some sense for the world in which we're living. We can connect our mind to the world in particular ways. David Hume's concern, however, is that the only knowledge that we can have is knowledge of the world that we actually have the experience of. But the concern that Hume sees with Western philosophy up to this point is that most philosophers are making a category error. Namely, they think that they are making perceptions of things, but they don't have the grounds upon which to actually make them. Which is why, if you take one phrase away from this entire discussion about David Hume, it's going to be the phrase useful fiction. Hume thinks that the overwhelming majority of the stuff that you are doing in your life is a useful fiction, because you have never actually experienced the thing that you think that you've experienced, and as a result of that, you do not have the grounds upon which your beliefs can be justified. That's the core of his argument. Now, he would say things, and there's a great passage in his book, Treatise Concerning Human Understanding, where he's talking about billiard balls. Right? So you've all played pool at some point in your life, probably, or at least you saw some movie where people were playing pool. Right? So you're all familiar with someone taking the cue stick back, hitting the cue ball, and the balls knocking around the table. Hume, when thinking about billiards, though, would say, yeah, what you're observing, though, is you're observing one white ball rolling, and then there's a different ball, let's say that is a partially white one with a red stripe on it. And that white ball rolls into the one with the stripe, and then that one starts going. Now, what you think that you're seeing is, the white ball caused the red one to move. Using contemporary physics terms, it transferred its energy through its kinetic motion to cause the second ball to move. But Hume would say, can you show me what color was the energy when it was transferring? You never are actually experiencing causation. Causation is instead a useful fiction that you use to put upon the world to try to make sense of stuff. But you're never actually experiencing causes. You are just seeing a lot of effects and drawing your own conclusions. Now, Hume will actually go even further with that sort of argument. As you're watching this video, Hume would say that you are a different person than the person who woke up this morning. You're a different person entirely, right? You are completely different because he has what's described as the bundle theory of the self, that you are only those mental impressions that your mind has in the here and now. But you retain that concept of identity as a useful fiction. So you don't need to change your name tag 5 or 6 times a day whenever your thoughts are changing. We retain that again as a useful fiction. Now, Hume's argument feels a little bit weird, and I'll admit that that's the case. But we'll say a couple of things about this that might start pushing you towards this Hume guy might be onto something. The first is a thought experiment that's called the Ship of Theseus, going all the way back into the ancient world, where imagine that you built a boat. You're a guy named Theseus and you built a boat. And, year by year, you replace, board planks and the masts and so on and so forth. But rather than throwing those boards away, you just keep them in a warehouse somewhere. And after, let's say, 10 years, every plank on that boat has been replaced. Now I have a question for you. What is the Ship of Theseus? Is it the boat that is actually floating around in the Mediterranean? Or is it the collection of wooden pieces in a warehouse somewhere? What is the Ship of Theseus? And now let's get it real for you. Every cell in your body, even the most slow to replace ones, will be replaced every 7 years. So why are you the you that was there 7 years ago? All of the cells are different. They've been changed out at different rates, but every cell is different than the you that was there 7 years ago. So why are you the you? So if your concern really is about the empirical, about the world that really is there, what happens when you run into those sorts of problems? All your cells are different. Why are you the you that's still there? Hume is just taking that sort of argument and compressing it to that, my mind, my soul, these ideas that I have of myself, that's the real me, that's out there? Yeah. But your ideas, your thoughts, your opinions are always changing as well. So you're constantly and always in flux. But again, we retain that as a useful fiction because it would be very hard to have a court system if your argument was like, sir, judge, yes, I do understand that I did steal those 11 Teslas, but you don't understand. I'm not that person anymore. That was a completely different bundle of sensory impressions. You should try that person, but I am no longer that person any longer. The judge would say, okay, interesting. Let's have a new hearing about getting you interred at a psych ward instead of the prison. Right? We retain our identity as a useful fiction because the world needs it. The world needs the theory of causation because otherwise, how could we explain why, objects fall from trees, for instance? But the last thing that I'll leave us with for these observations about David Hume and what happens if all of our knowledge comes from the empirical world, but we're not observing a bunch of stuff about the empirical world, we're just drawing those wrong conclusions, is that I want to say it was around maybe 2015, 2017, there was an Israeli research team that was studying quantumly entangled particles. And quantum entanglement is wild, kind of from the get-go. But what they were seeing in a lab setting was that there were two particles on different sides, and they were going to apply a magnetic field to one to see what the entangled particle would do with the other. The particle that was entangled started behaving like the field was applied to it before the field was applied to it. So it was kind of like acting like there was an effect before there was a cause. So I don't know what we do with that, except maybe that Hume's right about all of this, and that maybe causation really is a useful fiction that gets us by generally, but maybe the laws of cause and effect aren't the laws that we think that they are. Take it up with the quantum physicists, not the philosophers. I'm simply saying that Hume is raising a problem the contemporary quantum physicists are only now seeing. And if you actually read the studies about that, it's actually fairly funny because the Israeli research team is saying, we don't really know what this has to say about free will, but we're going to take it up with some Talmudic instructors and things like that to try to see what they would have to say about something like this. The takeaway that you want from this, though, is that really, if all of our knowledge can only come from our sensible impressions of the world, what limits does that put on us to actually say things that we think are all based on experience, but really, we're bringing in a lot of our assumptions into that as well. Hume would say, you are making philosophical mistakes when you are doing that, and you should strive to realize that those are fictions rather than realities.